Seth Rollins is going to WrestleMania 38 after his meeting with Mr. McMahon. Bobby Lashley returns to WWE television, and he also is going to WrestleMania 38 with his match confirmed last night on Monday Night Raw. Bianca Belair gives Becky Lynch a surprise haircut. We have an update when it comes to The Rock's status for WrestleMania next year in Hollywood, California. The Steiner brothers have been announced for the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2022. Tyson Kidd returns to his role as the WWE producer, plus another WrestleMania match has also been announced. All this and more in today's WWE news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of WWE as we're getting ever closer. We're on the road to WrestleMania and it's just days away. Saturday is the big kickoff, WrestleMania Night 1, then WrestleMania Night 2 on Sunday, WrestleMania Sunday, and given that it was Monday Night Raw last night, there are plenty of news stories to get into. So let's start off talking about Seth Rollins, because Rollins is indeed going to WrestleMania 38. Now, as noted over the weekend, WWE did a social media angle where Rollins revealed a text from WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon, who wanted to see him first thing Monday morning at WWE headquarters. In an update, WWE released the video of Rollins' meeting with Mr. McMahon. They also played it on Raw. The video shows Rollins interrupting McMahon in his office and immediately annoying him. Vince said he was surprised that Rollins didn't win his way into WrestleMania, blaming a lot of failures, and said Rollins should have just asked him to go to WrestleMania instead of jumping through so many hoops. Vince then said that this year's WrestleMania is different from others because it's the most stupendous, that was that word again, of all time, and that means it would be a good idea to have Rollins on the card. Vince said if Rollins were to be on the card, he'd need to be in his own main event too. Vince declared that Rollins is going to WrestleMania, but he did not name an opponent and said he was busy dismissing Rollins from his office. Now, Rollins then asked about his opponent. He said, who's it going to be? Vince said it would be someone he chooses, but Rollins won't find out until he's waiting in the ring and the opponent is introduced. Rollins ended the segment by shaking Vince's hand. Vince warned him and said he better not disappoint. Rollins then danced his way around Vince's desk and jumped on it to celebrate. Now, as has been widely reported and noted, the plan is for Cody Rhodes to be Seth Rollins' opponent at WrestleMania and make his WWE return at the event. This is going to be taking place on WrestleMania Saturday. Now, Rhodes is expected to be a member of the Raw roster moving forward. Besides the match with Rollins, he's also booked for the post-WrestleMania Raw next Monday. Now, Seth Rollins went on a Twitter tirade, shall we say, of, excitement, happiness, joy after the meeting with McMahon. He said, quote, "I am the moment, Lego, forget all this garbage, I'm mania bound, Vinnie Mac in clutch, hashtag WrestleMania, hashtag Raw, oh crapola, I nearly forgot, Raw can proceed its scheduled events for the evening as I've been granted my WrestleMania match, party till Dallas, LFG, Vinman for the win man, T-Rex is my home, what a night guys, I won't even make light of our heavyweight champ finally making an appearance on the show, yeehaw, hashtag WrestleMania, hashtag Raw, hashtag CrossFit Jesus." So, let's get into the segment itself. I must be said, I enjoyed the segment. I thought the segment was well done. I actually kind of like the way they shoot these kind of segments. Instead of just the traditional WWE single cam shot to tape boom, a little bit of production goes a long way, right? So whether it's a multi-cam setup, whether it's some edits, whether it's whatever, I thought this was well done. Vince McMahon continues his trend of being nearly impossible to understand whenever he does anything on television. I understand the guy's in his 70s and all that kind of stuff, but he just mumbles and grumbles. And this is coming from a guy who is known to also mumble. But oh my goodness, like through the segment, I'm having to like rewind it and go, what did he just say? Because Seth Rollins, and it was such a striking contrast between the two of them. You've got Seth Rollins who's dancing around, clicking and all this kind of stuff and laughing and doing what Seth Rollins does. And then you've got Vince McMahon who's Stupendous WrestleMania. I'm thinking, I don't know what he's saying. I don't know what he's saying during this period of time. Now, of course, we didn't see Cody Rhodes in the segment, and we didn't see Cody Rhodes on Raw last night, which I guess was somewhat expected. There was maybe a thought in the back of the mind once you saw that they were going to do this angle. It was like, are they going to close Raw? Maybe with the reveal of Cody Rhodes in the office, or are they going to save it until WrestleMania? Thinking about it, considering we're less than a week out and you've come this far, it makes sense to save it. If you've committed this much, you might as well go all the way and just wait for Cody Rhodes to return at WrestleMania. And that's what they're doing. Now, some people say, well, what about ratings? Or what about merchandise? What about tickets? I'll take surprise over that. And WWE knows that they're going to sell a ton of merchandise. They're going to sell a ton of tickets. They're going to get a lot of engagement when Cody Rhodes shows up anyway on social media. So I don't think particularly they care. The logic again, and this is the problem, isn't it, with this storyline? If you look into the logic, there is none. You know, Seth Rollins was going crazy for weeks. He was going to halt the show, and then Vince McMahon just goes, why didn't you just ask? Well, why doesn't anyone just ask then going forward? I hope this puts an end to this stupid idea that if you don't win matches and you don't get on WrestleMania, oh, how are you going to get on WrestleMania? What's going to go on there? By that case, Finn Balor, why don't you ask? Vince McMahon, where's your match? Damian Priest, why don't you do the same? Give the chairman a call. Say, where's my WrestleMania match? Because apparently all you have to do is ask, which again was so dumb. I guess I understand why they released it on social media, but the issue with doing that, because they released it way before Raw. I think they released it like around sort of 5:30 Eastern time, which obviously is way before Raw begins. Raw begins at 8. And the problem with doing that is that there would have probably been a lot of people that were going to tune in to Raw tonight for two reasons. One, to see what was the outcome of this meeting, what happened in this meeting. They probably wanted to see that. Two, they were tuning in on the off chance that maybe Cody Rhodes might show up. Maybe they'll jump the gun and maybe they'll have Rhodes return or be announced to be returning on Raw. When you saw this on social media, you went, okay, Rollins has got the match, so I know the outcome. Two, I also know Rhodes isn't going to be appearing until WrestleMania because Vince McMahon said that himself. When Seth Rollins said, who's my opponent going to be? And Vince's response is, you'll find out at WrestleMania when you're in the ring. That's just tick. Cody's not appearing tonight, so why bother? If that was the reason you were going to tune in, you were just told you don't need to. I was going to stay up and watch it live. I realised then I don't have to because Cody Rhodes isn't going to appear on it. And that's, I don't know what the effect of that would be, but I just didn't really get that. And I know some people will say, well, you can complain either way, right? Because times in which people thought that Cody was going to appear and then he doesn't appear, people get angry. But WWE has never advertised that Cody was going to appear on Raw anyway. Yet they've teased certain things, and I just felt that why just continue with that strategy? Why now, right before the last Raw before WrestleMania, why now do you abandon that strategy? To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But Rollins is going to be going to WrestleMania, and at least it's not a case of, say, The Undertaker versus John Cena, when it's not happening. We know it's not going to happen or anything like that. So the match has been announced, and we know that that's going to happen. But I did enjoy the segment. I thought it was well done. Like I said, I enjoyed the production of it. The logic of the storyline is what it is. I've said that several times, but I thought it was well done. And like I said, 2 nights of WrestleMania, and there are only a select few matches myself that I'm actually excited for and interested in seeing. This is one of them, obviously. So I'm very excited to see what happens, even though we kind of know what is going to happen, but that moment is going to be fantastic. That's stupendous. That's a stupendous moment. So I'm excited for that. Bobby Lashley is back, because he returned last night on Monday Night Raw, and Omos versus Bobby Lashley is now set for WrestleMania 38. Of course, Lashley has been out of action since the WWE Elimination Chamber pay-per-view in February, where he lost the WWE Championship to current champion Brock Lesnar after being pulled from the Chamber match due to a legitimate injury suffered the month before in the Royal Rumble title victory over Lesnar. Lashley reportedly did not need to undergo surgery for the shoulder injury, but he is returning ahead of schedule, as there was talk of Lashley being on the shelf for around 4 months. It ain't been 4 months. Now, last night on Raw saw Omos win another handicap match. Now, this This show last night was just bizarre. The booking of it was bizarre. The brand split does not exist the week before WrestleMania, apparently. Omos won a handicap match over the Viking Raiders. As soon as I saw the Viking Raiders come out, I went, one, they're from SmackDown. Two, that if you think WWE honestly cares about tag team wrestling, you've got a team like the Viking Raiders, who they try sometimes to build up on SmackDown. They're feeding him to a giant in a 2-on-1 handicap match, and they're not going to beat Omos, obviously, are they? And it's just like, okay, that shows you their position on the card. And then the match itself ended really awkwardly because Omos won by countout, which basically they did one move. Omos and Eric start the match. Omos hits the ropes. Eric hits the ropes. Omos clotheslines him. Eric goes down, rolls out to the floor, and then he was just counted out. And I understand they're trying to get over, just the clothesline was so dominant, but the clothesline looked like crap. It looked terrible. And it was just silly. It was just really, really silly. And I could understand that some people might go, yeah, but maybe he's protecting, right? Maybe they're actually protecting the Viking Raiders because they didn't beat them both. He just clotheslined and the other one was with a count out. And it's just like, but just why book the segment? Book it with 2 enhancement talent. You don't need to have the Viking Raiders in that. What purpose did that serve for the Viking Raiders? And realistically, what purpose did that serve for Omos? I understand that will be like, he beat a tag team, an established tag team, but they didn't need it. It was just unnecessary. Really unnecessary. Now, afterwards, Kevin Patrick interviewed Omos, and he dismissed the idea of anyone being able to stand up to him at WrestleMania 38, touting how he is still undefeated and able to dominate everyone. Dominate being the key word there. Lashley's music hit, then out he came to a babyface pop with what was, I suppose, quite interesting, no sign of MVP. We'll talk about that in a second. So Lashley and Omos went at it. While Omos dominated at first, Lashley ducked the clothesline and finally knocked the big man off his feet with a collision in the middle of the ring. Omos yelled back at Lashley from ringside, while Lashley taunted him from the ring. Fans chanted Bobby as he looked up at the WrestleMania 38 sign, and Omos nodded in agreement. So the match has been made official. It will be Bobby Lashley versus Omos. I don't know if it's been yet assigned to a night. We'll have to wait and see when it comes to that one, but the match is happening. It's Bobby Lashley versus Omos at WrestleMania. So a couple of things from that, I suppose. One, no MVP, which worries me, to be honest, because Lashley should be with MVP. I think they've wanted to do this. As I mentioned before, they've wanted to do this for a while, I think. Going all the way back to when they teased it in that tag team match when it was Bobby Lashley and MVP versus AJ Styles and Omos. And Lashley and Omos faced off and the crowd rumbled and they liked that. And I think the initial plan might have been, because they teased it a couple of times before, for MVP to break away from Bobby Lashley, or rather Bobby Lashley to break away from MVP, and then MVP becomes the manager or mouthpiece of Omos, and then it's MVP's new toy versus his old toy, essentially, and that's the match at WrestleMania. I think they would have done that storyline. The problem is that Lashley got hurt at the Royal Rumble, and between the end of January and nearly April, there's been no time to do it because Lashley's been on the shelf, and they didn't realize even if they could do it because they weren't really sure what was going on with Lashley. I think that's probably the scenario. So I wouldn't be shocked, and I mentioned this before. What's the finish of this match? Because I don't think Omos should lose. I don't. I think he should stay undefeated. If you're going to build up the monster, you keep building him up, and up. Eventually he gets defeated, but now isn't the right time to beat him. But also, you've got a returning Bobby Lashley who never lost the WWE Championship. Should he really be losing on his return as well? It doesn't make a lot of sense. The way they get out of it is when MVP comes to ringside, or MVP accompanies Lashley to the ring. The finish is MVP costing Bobby Lashley the match, and Omos wins. And I think that's how they get out of it, and that's how they'll proceed forward. I think MVP will be Omos's spokesperson, manager, because Omos can't talk. His promos are awful. And I know Lashley's aren't great either, but Lashley's more capable on the mic than Omos is, so I think that's the direction that they'll go in. And I wouldn't be surprised if this continues post-WrestleMania. The only thing I will say is that the issue is that this guy lost the WWE Championship in Bobby Lashley just because he got pulled from the match due to concussion protocol, and he comes back and he doesn't care. I want to face Omos. Wouldn't you want to come back for the WWE Championship? What, you're more offended because a guy said dominate? A tall guy said dominate? That's pro wrestling logic, folks. That tends to be how it works. Bianca Belair gave Becky Lynch a haircut last night on Monday Night Raw. Bianca Belair cut some strands of Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch's hair on this week's Raw. Now, the incident occurred after Lynch and Belair brawled in the ring 5 nights before their WrestleMania 38 match. After striking Belair with a steel chair, Lynch pulled out a pair of scissors and tried to cut off Belair's braid. Belair retaliated by hitting Lynch with 2 KODs before grabbing the scissors. She then proceeded to cut Lynch's hair. The segment ended with Lynch seething on her knees as the crowd chanted, "You deserve it." Later on Raw, an enraged Lynch referred to Belair as a bitch in a backstage segment. So, first of all, it's such a crutch of WWE, especially in the women's division when they just constantly call each other that. Like, why? Like, oh, there, I've never heard that before. And why is it only particular to the females? I think that's ridiculous. That's just a pet peeve of mine. But I mean, I enjoyed the segment. I thought it was well done. I think it's the next evolution of Becky Lynch. I think Becky Lynch is just going to have a different look. And I think that's great. I think Becky Lynch, I still disagree with her coming back as a heel. I don't think it was needed. I felt that the roster was heel heavy. Has the work been good since she returned as a heel? It's been fine, but the crowd still wants to cheer her. She still gets a massive ovation. I think she tried, and WWE have essentially tried to do with her what they did with Roman Reigns. The idea of, sort of heels are more popular now, so let's have her as a heel. But I just don't think it's needed. Roman Reigns, it was needed. Yes, with Becky Lynch, the crowd was absolutely turning on her at the end before she went on her pregnancy because she was being forced down everyone's throat. But such a long period of time had passed. It'd been nearly 18 months. They were happy to see her. And she still gets huge ovations anyway. But this is going to be the next evolution of it. She's going to change her look up. And I'm interested to see what look she rocks at WrestleMania. Speaking of rock, see what I did there, folks? The Rock, WrestleMania 39. What's going on? It's long been rumored that The Rock is going to be wrestling at WrestleMania 39 in the main event and possibly his final match inside of a pro wrestling ring. While The Rock facing Roman Reigns is the current working idea to main event WrestleMania 39, according to Dave Meltzer on the latest edition of Wrestling Observer Radio. It is believed that The Rock himself wants to do the match, and people in the company know that. However, this one is not etched in stone or guaranteed at this point. The company has been planning for this to happen for several months. So far, nothing has changed in that aspect. However, WWE is well aware that things could end up being altered. The situation is out of their hands at the moment, purely because of The Rock's busy schedule. The WWE legend has a very busy movie career alongside many other projects he takes on. Of course, next year he's also going to be trying to revive the XFL brand, which is set to take up more of his time. I mean, I've said this before. I genuinely have felt that this was the plan for a really, really long time. That's why Roman Reigns is going to win at WrestleMania 38. That's why I think he holds the Universal Championship until WrestleMania next year, and he beats The Rock. I really don't, because look on SmackDown, who's going to beat him? Who is on that roster legitimately? Who is the person that should beat Roman Reigns? You couldn't tell him. You couldn't tell me. Honestly, you couldn't. And I think the plan is to keep building Roman. He's the biggest star they've got. They want to do the biggest match in their eyes in terms of market value of all time. And Roman Reigns versus The Rock will be right up there. Another year of Roman Reigns being undefeated. Another year of him being Universal Champion. Unifying the titles. Beating Brock Lesnar again versus The Rock. The biggest movie star in the world, one of the biggest WWE superstars of all time, in SoFi Stadium, 100,000 people, Hollywood, California. It's a massive match. It's huge. And that's what they've wanted to do for a while. The biggest thing is The Rock's schedule. We have heard, and I joke about it, honestly, that how many times have we heard WWE wants The Rock for a match at this year's WrestleMania? They've done it every year, ever since his last match, which was proper match, which was WrestleMania 29 against John Cena. He was meant to wrestle Brock at WrestleMania 30, but he got hurt at WrestleMania 29. They were meant to do an angle with Rock and Brock the following night after WrestleMania 29, but The Rock got hurt. He had to undergo surgery, and then insurance companies freaked out because they went, wait a minute, this guy's wrestling. What, he can get hurt doing that? And they had to delay film production, and it cost millions of dollars. And The Rock was basically told, no, if you're in production, you ain't wrestling. And every year, WWE has hoped that The Rock would be wrestling at WrestleMania. Again, they hoped he was going to face Brock at WrestleMania 30. Didn't happen. I don't think he was ever scheduled to wrestle at WrestleMania 31, but the reason he appeared in that segment with Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Ronda Rousey is the hope that he would face Triple H at WrestleMania 32 the following year. It didn't happen. There was hope that he was going to wrestle in Florida at WrestleMania 33. It didn't happen. There was hope he was going to be Ronda Rousey's tag team partner at WrestleMania 34. It didn't happen because it was Kurt Angle in the end to go up against Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. They've hoped to have him at WrestleMania or wrestling at WrestleMania every year since his last match. Every single time it doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Because he's busy and he's got a movie career. So they can hope what they want, but I wouldn't be shocked between now and WrestleMania next year if he's busy and they have to go in a different direction. What is that direction? I've said that if Steve Austin's fight with Kevin Owens goes well on Saturday night, then maybe we see Roman Reigns versus Steve Austin next year. Because that's realistically the match I think that he deserves. Whether or not we'll go down that direction, I don't know. Let's talk about the Hall of Fame because it was announced yesterday that the Steiner brothers have been announced for the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2022. As was first reported by The Ringer, Rick and Scott Steiner will be getting inducted this Friday at the annual event. We don't know who's inducting them yet, but it's probably highly likely that it's going to be NXT star Bron Breakker, who is Rick Steiner's son. This one was rumored for a while, but the biggest sort of sticking point was that is Scott Steiner really going to want to go in? He said a lot of things about the Hall of Fame and WWE in the past. But the Steiner brothers are going in, and it is wild because this is a guy that, 6 or 7 years ago was banned. He was banned from attending the Hall of Fame because he said some things about Hulk Hogan and his then wife and all this kind of stuff, and he said a lot of things about WWE, and I think he had a lawsuit with Hogan, all this kind of stuff. So it's shocking that when the Thunderdome was around, just last year, by the way, folks, Scott Steiner's face, when people were putting up faces and all that, Scott Steiner's face was not allowed to be shown. He was persona non grata, and a year later, he's been inducted into the Hall of Fame. That's pro wrestling. That's how it works. And if you weren't sure about tuning in on Friday, The Undertaker going into the Hall of Fame in Texas is a big enough reason, frankly. And out of character, probably Undertaker as well, I'm assuming, is a big enough reason to go in. But Scott Steiner with a live microphone on WWE programming, yes, please. That is going to be fascinating to see. And I'm very excited to see that, it must be said. Tyson Kidd. Now, Tyson Kidd was on a bit of a hiatus recently, but it looks like veteran talent Tyson Kidd is back to work in his role as a WWE producer. It was noted back in early February how Kidd had taken some time off. He usually works behind the scenes with WWE's women's division, but Fit Finlay, who's been working behind the scenes in NXT for the past year, was brought into the 2022 Royal Rumble event to produce the Women's Rumble, as Kidd hadn't produced any matches in the weeks leading up to the Rumble. The report on Kidd from February noted that the reason for Kidd's absence was actually tied to the Royal Rumble, but he was still employed by WWE as a producer, and no other details were provided. Another report noted that there had been some rumblings within WWE that said Kidd was quitting the company, but that was chalked up to miscommunication. There was also talk of Kidd being frustrated with the company and unhappy with how things were going, but WWE sources quickly dismissed those rumors. The last word in February that Kidd would be back to work and that he was on good terms with the company. It was also reported that he was taking time off to help heal his neck. While Kidd is able to function well, that doesn't change the fact that his neck is in terrible shape and does at times have flare-ups, considering all the traveling that they then do. In an update, Fightful Select have reported that Kidd is listed as a producer/agent on the internal run sheet for last night's Raw. He hasn't been listed for any Raw or SmackDown matches and segments since the January 10 Raw and the January 14 SmackDown. Kidd being back to work is a win for the women's division as he receives universal claim behind the scenes from all sources that have worked with him. So good to hear that Tyson Kidd is back to work just in time for WrestleMania, especially with those big matches coming up in the women's division, and I'm sure we'll see his fingerprints all over them. Finally, a match that we spoke about yesterday has now been officially announced for WrestleMania. WWE has announced another tag team match for WrestleMania 38. It was confirmed yesterday afternoon that Kofi Kingston and King Xavier Woods will represent the New Day when they take on Sheamus and Ridge Holland, who will have Butch in their corner. WWE has announced the New Day versus Sheamus and Holland for WrestleMania Saturday. Of course, this was meant to be originally a six-man tag team match featuring all members of the New Day plus Butch actually wrestling, but of course Big E broke his neck. I wasn't sure if we were going to see a tag team match or a 3-on-2 handicap match, or if we were going to see some kind of replacement for Big E, but that's not going to be the case. We're just going to see a tag team match. To be honest, is it very WrestleMania-y? No, it's a TV match. It's on a pay-per-view, and I feel bad for Pete Dunne, but I feel bad for him anyway because he's called Butch, and what a terrible name that is. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Wrestling News 365, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.